All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Awesome. Well, today we're tackling something that I think a lot of us can relate to, getting those important messages across to leadership, you know, specifically when it comes to compliance risks.
Ah, yes. That can definitely be tricky.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at an episode of the new Compliance Officer Playbook podcast for some guidance. Like, imagine you found this compliance risk, right? And it could
Hmm.
seriously affect the organization.
Yeah.
How do you make sure your leadership team really gets it? Like,
Forward.
really gets it and actually does something about it?
Right, because they're busy people. It's about cutting through the noise and making sure they understand the issue, but also what they can do about it.
Exactly. And a podcast really emphasizes, like, the first step is knowing your audience.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. You wouldn't communicate with a data-driven leader the same way you would with someone who's more visionary, right?
Right. You got to speak their language.
Exactly. Someone who's all about the numbers, you're going to want to hit them with those hard facts and figures. But for the big picture folks, you need to focus on the potential impact, the bigger consequences.
So it's almost like, okay, imagine explaining a complicated math problem, right, to a
Right.
toddler versus explaining it to, like, a college student. Totally different approaches.
Uh-huh. That's a great analogy.
Thanks. So you got to tailor it. Okay, so we know our audience, right? Now,
Yeah.
how do we actually craft a message that works, that gets them to pay attention and take action?
Well, the podcast has this really handy framework. They call it CLEAR.
Clear.
Yeah. So it stands for concise, logical, evidence-based, actionable, and relevant.
Concise, logical, evidence-based, actionable, relevant. Okay, I see where they're going with this.
It's a great checklist to make sure your message is on point.
So concise, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. Get to the point, right?
Yeah, no one wants to wade through pages of jargon when you can just deliver a clear, succinct message.
Okay, concise. Got it. But what about logical? How do you make sure your message makes sense to, like, a busy executive?
Well, it's all about connecting the dots for them,
Right.
right? You got to lay it out in a way that's easy to follow. Say, for example, your company's expanding into a new market internationally,
Okay, new international market.
and you found some, well, potential bribery and corruption risks that happen to be associated with this expansion.
Ooh, tricky situation.
It is. So a logical approach, you'd first give them a quick overview of the expansion plan, right? Highlight those specific bribery risks, and then, really important, connect those risks to the potential damage. Legal trouble, reputation damage, all of that.
So it's like not just dropping the bomb, but showing them the whole chain reaction, providing context.
Exactly.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Then evidence-based, I'm guessing that means backing up those concerns with some cold, hard data.
You got it. This is where you bring in those facts, the statistics, maybe even some real-world examples of companies that, face some consequences because of similar compliance issues.
Yikes. Yeah, those can be pretty powerful. Nobody wants to be that cautionary tale.
Right. It adds weight to your message, makes it real for them.
Okay, evidence, logic, keeping it concise. I see where this is going. But sometimes, even with all that, it can be hard to really make compliance issues stick.
Yeah, you're right. It's got to resonate, right?
How do you get past that, make it stick?
Well, that's where storytelling comes in. It's a powerful tool. Think about it. Weaving a narrative around the risk instead of just throwing facts and figures at them.
Storytelling. So instead of saying, hey, we have a bribery risk, you tell a story about what could happen.
Exactly. Let's go back to that bribery example. Instead of just saying there's a risk of bribery in this new market, you could create a scenario. Imagine this. We've just landed this huge contract in this new market, right? Everything's looking amazing. But then a competitor claims we, bribed a foreign official to get the deal.
Ooh, that's getting intense.
And suddenly, boom, we're hit with this massive investigation. Our reputation is, well, tarnished and the contract in jeopardy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that paints a much more vivid picture. It's almost like giving them a sneak peek into a future they really want to avoid.
Right. It makes it more real, more relatable, and memorable.
Okay, storytelling. Got it. But what about all the data, the reports? How do we make that stuff engaging? Because let's be real, sometimes it can be pretty dry.
Well, that's where data visualization can really shine. It's like taking those dense spreadsheets and turning them into something that people can actually grasp quickly. Dashboards, charts, graphs, things like that.
Right, make it visual.
Exactly. Like with that bribery risk example, you could use a heat map, right? Visually represent each country and its associated level of bribery risk.
Ooh, I like that. Makes it easy to see the hot spots.
Exactly. The information is right there, easy to digest, easy to remember.
Okay, so we're making the data more engaging, telling a story. But how do we show leadership where we stand compared to other companies? Is that important?
Oh, absolutely. Benchmarking is key. It gives them context, right? Helps them understand if our risks are higher, lower, or about the same as the industry average.
Right. So it's not just about the numbers themselves, but what they mean
Yeah,
in the bigger picture.
exactly. It shows them where we fit in and what we need to focus on.
Got it. So we've painted a clear picture of the risks, but now how do we actually prompt action? Like how do we get them to, move from aware to doing something about it?
That's where the actionable part of CLEAR comes in. It's all about giving leadership specific recommendations. Don't just say we need to mitigate bribery risks. That's too vague.
Maybe specific.
Instead, say we need to implement mandatory anti-bribery training for every employee involved in the new market expansion.
Okay, that's much clearer. Give them a roadmap, not just a destination.
Exactly.
Now, the podcast also mentioned a tool called the Executive Risk Report. What's that all about?
Well, think of it like a really high-level summary. It lays out the key risks facing the organization and, of course, your recommendations on how to address them. It's perfect for those busy executives who need that, quick snapshot of what's going on.
So it's like the Cliffs Notes for compliance. I like it. Gets right to the point.
Yep. And it helps ensure that everyone's on the same page.
Okay, so we're communicating those risks effectively. But beyond that, how can we shift the whole perception of compliance, from being this burden to something more positive?
That's a great point. It's about reframing compliance as a value driver. Think about it.
Yeah.
Good compliance practices, they can actually strengthen your company's reputation.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And attract those customers who really value ethical behavior. And ultimately, it protects your bottom line. You avoid those nasty fines and those legal battles.
Hmm. So it's kind of like investing in a good insurance policy. You might not want to pay for it up front, but it can save you a whole lot of trouble in the long run.
Exactly. It's an investment, not just a cost.
So you're not just checking boxes. You're protecting the organization. You're creating value.
Exactly.
All right, so just to recap, we got to know our leadership team, tailor that message, keep it clear, logical, evidence-based, right. Don't be afraid to tell a story, make it visual, benchmark against others, provide those actionable recommendations, and frame compliance as a value driver. Phew, that's a lot to keep in mind.
It is, but communicating effectively, it's so worth it. Think about the rewards.
Yeah.
As you refine your own approach, consider the dynamics of your specific leadership team. What works best for them?
That's a great point. It's not one size fits all.
I know. You got to find what clicks.
Awesome. Well, thanks for diving into this with me. It's been really insightful. And to all our listeners out there, think about your own leadership team. What unique challenges do you face when communicating compliance risks to them? And how can you use these strategies to get your message across? We'll see you in the next deep dive.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.